Well, good morning. Good morning to you, Mr. Ray. How you doing?
Good morning, brother Mitch. What's going on, my man?
Hey, man. We're just starting out here early on a Sunday morning. I've been up for a couple of hours. Just there's a behind the scenes story that maybe one day we'll tell the people that listen to us that if you're out there and you listen to us and we are credit worthy. But there's sometimes we just it takes a little bit to get us connected, okay? And I appreciate you, Ray, for taking time. Maybe we'll unfold that background story one day. Maybe that'll be a session all by itself where we actually talk about what we do here. All right. We are going to do another Ethics of the Fathers today, and I'm looking forward to this one because it's got some pretty heavy thoughts behind it, pretty heavy insights into it. And Ray, again, if you would enlighten some of those viewers that we have that come from the traditional Christian background, um, when we talk about a Mishnah, what is a Mishnah?
So a Mishnah is literally a repetition of a teaching of a tradition. A study by repetition. That's what the Mishnah is, and Jesus would have been extremely acquainted with these, being brought
Good.
and born and raised on the written and oral Torah. So he would be very acquainted with this idea.
Awesome, because that was going to be my next question. Was going to be the familiarity and the how deep Jesus would have been into this, because we see this from his teachings, we see this from his life, and so as we read these out and we explore these and we unfold these, we've got to remember that these are ideas and concepts and things that were deeply ingrained into the DNA of who Jesus was and
Exactly.
a lot of his teachings as well. So this, we're going to get right started to it because I know that we've got a lot to unfold with this.
Yeah.
Um, this is chapter 1, Mishnah 11, and it goes like this. Avtalion said, "Scholars, be careful with your words, lest you incur the penalty of exile and are banished to a place of evil waters. The disciples who come after you will then drink from them and die, and thus the name of heaven will be desecrated." And if we look down to the actual insights, the Breslov insights, it says, "Scholars, be careful with your words." The great Rebbe Nachman says, "If you lack mature understanding of your Torah studies, you should not lecture on them in public. This is also true if you have no new insights to offer. Although the Holy One surely delights in all your words of Torah,
All words of Torah. Yeah.
all words of Torah, you should speak only about matters that are clear to you, as our
Hmm.
sages comment on the verse. Say to say to wisdom, you are my sister. This comes from Proverbs 7:4. If a matter is as clear to you as your sister's impersonability,
Impermissibility. Yeah.
yes, that one too, you may speak of it, but if not, keep silent.
Huh. Let me interrupt here for a second.
Yes.
So, within our background and within the Christian world and thought, I mean, it's very easy for one to be like, hey, just read the scriptures and whatever the Spirit gives you, go ahead and teach it. I mean, and I'm not gonna pull no words here, and I'm just gonna tell you how it is. That's extremely wrong. Okay, that's extremely wrong to do, and it doesn't work. Many heretical teachings have gone out forth and plagued many others who were also ignorant about the Bible, the context of the Bible, um, uh, the religious context of the Bible, what the teachings actually meant. and people within the church were just given free access to say, and free, ability to be able to say whatever you want, whatever that scripture meant to you, you know how it applied to you. You're supposed to explain it however that was, and that's good to go. I mean, that works too. I saw many times in the church, church where I went to for some time, that the pastor will call someone who had been there for years, one of the elders or someone else who's preparing, and just tell them, hey, you're going to preach this day. And these people had you know no background of I've actually studied, or not even been to seminary or anything like that, and they would come and give you their take on the words. Wrong, right, no, doesn't matter. It didn't matter, as because since he had been in the church for a while, he had already been conditioned a certain way by the pastor of that church. And so the pastor wouldn't think that he would go too far off from what he had been teaching for some time. Okay.
Yes.
So we read in the book of James, his actual name is Jacob, one of the brother of Jesus of Nazareth. He says this. We just read what Rabbi Nachman, a Torah scholar, a scholar of the Bible, what he says about being very careful with your words and your studies. Okay, especially you should not lecture them in public if you're not prepared. Okay, James says this. Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for and I must say this. I mean, James was most likely, his audience was probably other Jews who were already acquainted with the Bible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, he had no idea that he was speaking to a non-Jew, especially not educated within the Bible, right?
Yes.
He says, not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. Greater strictness. It's very vital that one who teaches should be very careful what he teaches,
Yes.
because of what our Mishnah says. The Mishnah says, scholars, be careful with your words, lest you incur the penalty of exile and are banished to a place of evil waters. All right. It says, if you're not careful with that, the disciples who come after you will drink from these waters and die, and thus the name of heaven will be desecrated. Keep going, Mitch, to see what else we find here.
Sure. Reb Nolson says also, there are many true Sadikims, which are righteous teachers.
Righteous teachers. There you go.
But in each generation, there is one true Sadik who represents the point of truth between the Sadikim, for he bears the essence of truth. This Sadik corresponds to the paradigm of the precious stone, the luminary of truth that shines throughout all the worlds. Whoever wishes to receive the truth must receive it from him. By contrast, the other Sadikim and all the other worthy people of the generations are like windows through which the light of the Sadikim shines.
To give an example of what this is talking about, the tzaddikim are righteous people. It's plural for righteous people, men and women, right? A
Yes.
tzaddik is one. It's a singular for one righteous person. To give you a clear point of what Reb Nosson is teaching there, is like Moses. Okay, Moses is the quintessential or the ideal tzaddik, the righteous man of truth, right? Moses is this man, and in the Bible, in the Torah, in the law, we read that the spirit that was on Moses was given to 70 elders, because God told Moses the written and the oral law. He explained it to him. Moses thereby explained it to the elders. So the spirit that was in Moses went into the elders, okay, and the elders were able to teach the people, all the other people, okay. This is what it's talking about. That it says the tzaddik, the righteous man, corresponding to Moses, corresponds to the paradigm of the precious stone, the luminary of truth that shines throughout all the worlds. Whoever wishes to receive the truth must receive it from him. You must receive it from Moses. The elders had to receive it from Moses. By contrast, the other righteous men and women and all the other worthy people of the generation are like windows through which the light of this righteous man through Moses shines. You get that?
Yes.
uh, Jesus would fall into this category of like this Moses.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so this is what we're talking about here. Keep going.
And also, let me add to that too, Ray, that going back initially to what you had mentioned in the first piece that we read, where we have something in the Christian world today called sola scripta, and this is something that's pushed very hard from the reform side of education, the reform viewpoint of theology, and this is very dangerous. This is very dangerous where to make a comment, well, all I need is the scripture and the Holy Spirit. Well, the problem with that is, and this is said a lot in the circles of the churches around where I live, um, the problem with that is you're number one, you're talking about an English translation from a Greek perspective, okay, a Greek interpretation, where you now have uh, the Holy Scriptures were from a Hebraic interpretation and a Hebraic
Context.
thought process, not a Greek thought process. Um, the Greek interpretation by which we read the New Testament, and then to take that out of, it's almost like taking it out of context and saying that I can get what I need to get from just reading this English Bible, and the Holy Spirit will tell. Well, if your point is to support and back up a particular viewpoint of something, and you can twist that scripture around to meet that, okay,
Yeah.
you can make it happen. You can also make Jesus be any type of Jesus you want Jesus to be if you take him out of context or out of his Jewishness or out of
Right.
his historical context, okay? And so when you mentioned that earlier, that is that is that's crucial that people understand the difference between the Greek understanding, how we get to sola scripta, and how it's very dangerous if you do not look at those that truly understand the teachings of Jesus, truly understand the context by which we receive Jesus, um, but also by which he teaches. And we'll get to this in just a minute as you continue to unfold this, but that is that is a that is a context or a format by which a lot of churches today, they hear things and they don't realize that these things are taken out of context, or that they're read in their simplistic form of an English translation, and it doesn't match up to what.
Every reader of the Bible should know these facts, like you were saying that the Bible. I mean, especially in the New Testament, the what Christians understand as the Hebrew scriptures. They also call them the Old Testament. They have to understand that that scripture is originally comes in Hebrew, and so it had to be translated from the Hebrew into some type of English or whatever other language anybody wants to write. And then the New Testament, we only have copies of it in the Greek. Okay, but when we say that, we understand that the first century Jews, Jesus and his apostles, none of them spoke Greek. I mean, did they know a few words? Maybe. I mean, because there was Romans, the Romans were in control, and maybe they needed it for, um, at that time, the Greek language was like the English language, and it had gone out through all the world. But that doesn't mean that a lot of religious Jews spoke it fluently. They didn't. I mean, a lot of them didn't need to use it, except for maybe when they had to go to the market or something like that. They
Right.
a few words to get into to know how to speak to a centurion or something like that. I don't know. But I can tell you that Jesus nor his apostles, who especially from the Galilee, didn't speak Greek. They spoke Hebrew and Aramaic, and
Yes.
they also thought in this way. Okay,
Yes.
when you come into the New Testament, which is been preserved in the Greek language, who translated it for us? It
Yes.
wasn't a Jew. It wasn't a Jew. I mean, it wasn't even a Hindu. It was a Christian.
Yes.
Okay, a Christian with a specific slant and a specific lens. And when he translated these words of the New Testament into English, he translated it with slants that scholars today would be able to tell you, hey, that's actually not in the original. Um, there were slants that had a specific lens that that Christian already had embedded in him. I'll give you a perfect example. There's a verse in the Gospel of John that says like this. It says, the law, the Torah, was given by Moses. Okay? And then it says like this in English, it says, but grace and truth came through Jesus, the Messiah. That word but is not in the original, but a lot of the translators used it in order to put that specific Christian theology and conflict within the text as if it was original. Some Bibles don't even have it in italics.
Yes.
A lot of
Yes.
Bibles don't even have it in italics.
Yes.
The good ones will have that but in the italics, so you can
Yes.
know that it's not original.
Yes.
So if you read it without that but, it actually sounds totally different.
Yes. And
It doesn't
that
put it
comes in the
doesn't
King James Version. That's where it originated from, to complete that separation.
to separate the scriptures of Jesus that he was raised on to this New Testament
Yes.
deal.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so
That's
but
good.
you know,
That's good, Ray. And that leads us to, the difference between the Greek mindset and the Hebrew mindset. The Greek mindset would be abstract, where there's got to be A, B, C, D, systematic theology, a systematic approach. We box God in. We know all about God. These are the attributes of God, so on and so on and so on. Where the Hebraic mindset that Jesus had and his disciples had were dynamic. They were always unfolding. There was always multiple interpretations. There was always the binding and loosening, the struggling with it. There was never the you, you couldn't find a systematic approach in Jesus's mind, because that's not what Jews do. That's not that's not the way that they approach the oral tradition, the written tradition, or any part of the Holy Scriptures. And so, in my thought, in my mind, the Greek building of the foundation of the New Testament has gone so far off keel that it literally brings a different Jesus to the table.
yeah.
And when people do what they should do, and that is read Jesus within his context, which means you got to go back into the Holy Scriptures and understand the culture, as we've said before. That's how you begin that foundation. Let me get back to this, where it says the truth of the other side of him cannot completely subjugate the powers of the falsehood in the world. Although at times a true Sadducee may succeed in destroying a certain falsehood, this success does not endure. Afterward, the power of the falsehood increases, undoing
The rectification.
the right, the tikkun, and the undermining of the truth that he had introduced to the world. Indeed,
Stop real quick, Mitch.
yes,
Let me elaborate on this real quick. So it says, and I think that Jesus falls within this, unbeknownst to him, because he had already died. And we also have to understand that Jesus himself never wrote anything. His apostles wrote what his teachings were, and
yeah,
gave us a context of his life, etc. But it says, although at times a great righteous man may succeed in destroying a certain falsehood, this success does not endure. Why? Afterward, the power of falsehood increases. And this surely did increase after Jesus' death, because his words and his teachings were exiled to Rome, where non-Jews put it up on a banner. And for the most part, according to according to history, basically created a new religion upon his words. It says, afterwards, the power of falsehood increases, undoing the rectification and undermining the truth that he had introduced to the world. It says, indeed, at times, the power of falsehood may increase by means of the very truth that this righteous man elicited, sapping it of its strength and transforming it into sham and deceit. Thus, our sages caution, scholars, be careful with your words, lest you incur the penalty of exile and are banished to a place of evil waters. All right, and we could say, I'll ask you. Was this Jesus's fault? I mean, I do not that I do not believe so. It wasn't his fault because we just explained, we know for a fact that he never wrote anything. His apostles, which he taught were other Jews, other religious Jews, okay? And so he taught them personally. They walked with him. Not even Paul walked with Jesus, okay? You have to keep this in mind.
Yes.
And the 12 apostles walked, breathed, ate, slept where he slept, everything. They were truly discipled and knew the ins and outs of their master. And so, as a matter of fact, I'm going to read Jesus' own words about what he said about what to do with his teachings and how to be careful. He says this in Matthew 10:5. He says, Yeshua explicitly taught, these 12 disciples Yeshua sent out because they were shlichim. Shlichim is a shaliach, a sent out one, okay?
Yes.
One who's sent from his master. These 12 disciples Yeshua sent out, instructing them. Listen to what he instructs them, guys. Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans. Gentiles and Samaritans had this in common. They were not part and connected with the faith of the Torah. They had no connection to it. So he says, go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I didn't say that. I didn't make that up. And if maybe you read over Jesus' words and you forget that he says that, we may need to go back and reread these things again. And he clearly said that. Okay? He said this while he was alive. I'm not talking to you about what happened after his resurrection.
Right.
This is a different topic.
Right.
Okay? And so we again here with the great caution, be careful, scholars. Those who call themselves scholars, be careful with your words, lest you incur the penalty of exile and are banished to a place of evil waters. We need to figure out, Mitch, what is this evil waters? So keep going, right under there.
So, and by the way, what you just said is mind-boggling for people who have grown up in the Christian world. Number one, to realize that Jesus never actually wrote any of his teachings down or never wrote anything down because he didn't have to.
That was a Jewish thing. The Jews learned through oral transmission.
Yes.
If you go back to the times of Jesus and even after Jesus, a lot of rabbis is what Jesus was, a great rabbi, right?
Yes.
A lot of rabbis never actually wrote down any teachings.
Yes.
Their main disciples,
Yes.
their teachings survived through their disciples.
Yes.
Not until recently has many rabbis actually have written their own works and stuff like that.
Yes.
But in the ancient times, this is the way it was. Disciples of Jews, of other rabbis, they learned through oral transmission of these teachings.
Yes. And this is the problem that we have also with Paul is, and we will get into this one day, Paul's letters were not conversations. Paul's letters were personal letters to individual churches about talking about the resurrected Jesus and addressed certain things with those particular people who knew what he was talking about, right? Who understood the concepts he was talking about. By no means was Paul creating a new religion.
No.
By no means did Jesus create a new religion. By no means did Paul ever think that his letters were going to be canonized as a foundational piece of a new religion
Such a
called
good point. Yeah.
Christianity.
Yeah.
And we will get to this one day, but that is such a powerful concept when you begin to read or you listen to people that teach Paul, and you listen to people that teach letters like Ephesians, like Galatians, and things like this. It's so easy for those to be taken out of their historical context and to mean something different if your objective is to create this new religion and go after souls. Okay.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
but anyway, we'll get to that. Let me finish this up. Indeed, at times, the power of falsehood may increase by means of the very truth that this Sadiq elicits, elicited, sapping, sapping it of its strength and transforming it into sham and deceit. Thus, our sages caution scholars, be careful with your words, lest you incur the penalty of exile and are banished from the place of evil waters. But the true Sadak, who personifies the point of truth between the Sadakim, knows all this. Gazing through all of history until the last generation, he knows the ultimate truth. Thus our sages say of Moses that he knew every insight that an expert Torah scholar would ever conceive. This unique Tzaddik knows how to bring truth into the world in a manner that can never be thwarted or corrupted. And this is very evident with Jesus and with his teachings. Although the powers of falsehood will muster all of their strength against him, his words will endure in the end, as it is written. The lip of the true endures forever.
Let
Proverbs
me stop.
12.
Let me stop you right there real quick,
Yes,
Mitch.
sir.
So this is so true. I mean, it says this unique righteous man knows how to bring truth into the world in a manner that can never be thwarted or corrupted. We are evidence of that. You and I and other people like us are evidence of that. That while his words have indeed been corrupted, that his words have indeed been taken a different slant and a different lens and a different meaning than what was intended, his words ultimately cannot be hidden. It cannot be hidden under it cannot be hidden under something. The light is too strong, and if a person truly researches and searches with all of his heart that point of truth, he can get back to the right historical context of Jesus' true words. I mean, this is what it's saying right here. This is where Rabbi Nachman is saying about a righteous man's words, his teachings on Torah, right? His teachings on the Bible. It says, although the powers of falsehood will muster all of their strength against him, against someone like Jesus, his words will endure in the end, as it is written in Proverbs. The lip of truth endures forever. What did Jesus say? He said stuff like, he taught his disciples, he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. He's talking to his disciples. And Jesus had a very high self-awareness of himself. Okay. And he felt that he was this righteous man of truth, this
Mhm.
point of contact for other people. Okay.
Yes.
So he believed these things. It says, for this righteous man, who is the point of truth between all the righteous will reveal the very root of truth to the world, causing the root of falsehood to be destroyed completely. And I'm not trying to denigrate any other rabbi. I mean, so many rabbis have done so much good for the world. I mean, I can name them. A lot of them are my own heroes.
Yeah.
A lot of them, I would never had understood the depth of Jesus' teaching without these other rabbis that I can mention. Okay, especially like one of my favorites who were using his commentary right here, Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. Okay, these people are like our heroes, right?
Yes.
But it wasn't Rabbi Nachman's teachings who have reached the four corners of the world. It wasn't that rabbi. It wasn't Maimonides whose teachings reached the four corners. If you go to the Amazon rivers and you talk to one of those tribal Indians over there and you tell them, hey, sir, do you know who Rabbi Nachman of Breslov is? I mean, he wouldn't know. If you tell him who Maimonides is, he'll be like, who? But if you tell him, sir, I mean, do you know who Jesus Christ is? He'll be like, of course, that's my savior or whatever. They've heard of that Jew. The four corners of the world have heard of that Jew and of his teachings.
Yes.
And this is basically what Rabbi Nachman of Brestov is saying. He says, for this righteous man who is the point of truth between all the righteous will reveal the very root of truth to the world, causing the root of falsehood to be destroyed. I mean, honestly, before Jesus came in the first century and his apostles, the teachings that were based on Jesus' teachings, I mean, the world was plagued by gross idolatry. People actually still bow down to sticks, stones, trees. They believed in a polytheistic many gods, right? There was various gods. These things were destroyed on the wake of Jesus. Even if there was many things that came on that wake too that got misrepresented and mistaught, we know through history that polytheism and monotheism became real strong in the world after that, because of the teachings of Jesus.
Yes.
Through the vehicle of Christianity, of course.
Yes.
It was able to wipe it out. Okay? Reb Noson continues on. He says like this. He says, at the present, it is impossible to reveal the truth directly. So he's talking about, what is the word? Unadulterated truth. At the present, it is impossible to reveal truth directly. This level of truth is impossible. So he says, listen to this. This is deep. If we were to proclaim the truth openly, falsehood would twist it to its own ends and become even stronger. I mean, we kind of see that in everyday life. We for sure see it in our religious circles. And it says, therefore, the wise must disguise the truth, as the Mishnah cautions. Scholars, be careful with your words. Similarly, Rabbi Nachman states that the true righteous man must conceal himself with many garments in order to speak with others. And Jesus did do this. That's why Jesus used a lot of parables.
Yes.
He would dress up his teachings with parables in order that the masses or his disciples, and even still then, when you read the Gospels, a lot of times they say they didn't understand. They come to him privately and they ask him, hey, can you explain this to us? Okay.
Yes.
Because sometimes the parables themselves were not very clear. That's why in Judaism it's taught that it's vital that, I mean, this is good that we learn from holy books, right, that are based on the Torah, but it's vital that you go to a rabbi, because a disciple may have a specific question that only a rabbi can teach, because he's alive, he's vibrant, he's actually a living Torah.
Yes.
He's a living, breathing Torah. He has the Torah internalized in him. He can answer specific questions. Okay?
Yes.
So it's vital. It's vital. It says here, therefore the wise must disguise the truth, as the Mishnah cautions. Scholars, be careful with your words. Similarly, Rabbi Nachman states that the true righteous man must conceal himself with many garments in order to speak with others. In the future, however, when the Messiah comes, falsehood will be destroyed, and it will be possible to declare the truth openly before every nation and assembly. I'll ask a question for our hearers, for everyone. This is going to sound controversial, but I just want to make people think. In the hearts and minds of Christians, Jesus is the Messiah. But listen to what will happen when the Messiah comes. When the Messiah comes, falsehood will be destroyed, and it will be possible to declare the truth openly before every nation and assembly. Brother, is falsehood destroyed? Has falsehood been destroyed since Jesus' coming? Falsehood has not been destroyed since Jesus' coming. It has multiplied and multiplied and multiplied and multiplied.
Yes.
And it's horrible in our day and age too. Okay?
Yes.
So the point of truth, when you do speak it, it can be corrupted. People can twist it. It won't be listened to. Okay? That's the type of stuff that we've been dealing with. Of the present, it is written. Of the present, he's talking about of what's going on today, because the Messiah is still not revealed. Truth shall be cast to the earth. Daniel 8:12. This is exactly what happened to Jesus. He's a point of truth, right? He may be even a great point of truth. He's been cast to the ground. He must rise from the ground, and every heart of anyone who follows him, they must start anew and raise up truth from the ground. It's not the unadulterated truth that everyone receives. Nobody receives that. Truth must rise from the ground. You must work for that.
Mm-hmm.
You got to really learn it.
Yes.
Okay? So it says, of the present it is written, truth shall be cast to the ground, Daniel 8:12. But in the future, truth shall sprout from the earth, what we just said, Psalms 85:12, and be revealed to the eyes of all. This is
All.
what you and I are working at, to try to do our part in revealing this truth from the ground.
Yes.
Okay, from the ground up, the historical context, the religious context, the cultural context of Jesus and his apostles, right?
Yes.
And learning the faith as they would know it. They would be at home with someone like Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, with the Rambam. They would be at home with this. This is part of the fountain of truth that we know from the Bible.
True.
Keep going with Reb Noson, Mitch.
Our sages explained that Joab, King David's general, made a grievous error during his campaign against Edom. See this in 1 Kings 11:15 through 16. This was due to a mistake on the part of his childhood teacher. The latter taught him incorrectly how to read the verse. You shall obliterate the memory of Sikar or Amalek in Deuteronomy 25:19. The same Hebrew letters, if vocalized differently, can be read as communicating a somewhat different command. You shall obliterate the males of Amalek, meaning not the entire tribe. Therefore, Joab failed to destroy the entire Amalekite nation, which eventually led to a great harm. Joab erred concerning the mitzvah of destroying Amalek, a mandate upon which the entire Torah and the redemption of the Jewish people rest. Therefore, the design of the evil inclination for Amalek is the very personification of evil, impurity, and falsehood. In spiritual terms, Amalek personified the evil inclination which continually tricks people through lies and deceit.
Hmm.
This is why the Torah commands us in such strong terms to obliterate the name and the memory of Amalek. As our sages state, God's name, his divine throne, will not be complete until the memory of Amalek has been obliterated. For the revelation of God's name is complete through truth, which is the antithesis of Amalek and the falsehood that Amalek propagates in the world. This is why our sages warn us to be extremely careful in choosing our teachers and spiritual mentors.
Huh.
The main purpose of a teacher is to clarify the truth. An improper teacher who lacks devotion to truth will inevitably mislead his students and disciples, and dire consequences.
With dire consequences. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
I mean, that's pretty clear, man. Here, I'll read over the digestive commentaries, which is little snippets of what all we just read to
yes,
remind folks. It says here, according to our Mishnah, lest you incur the penalty of exile. What does this mean? That is, lest you are forced to dwell in a place devoid of Torah and fear of heaven. I'm sorry, but this
yeah,
is exactly what has happened to Jesus and his teachings. They fell into an environment, into a part of the world where they that is devoid of Torah learning.
hmm,
Actually, the Christians were very antithetical against anything that was Torah. This comes not from my words. This comes from the very mouths of the church fathers. Okay,
yes,
a place devoid of Torah and fear of heaven. They didn't have correct fear of heaven. They had a fear of heaven that came upon their understanding, but not the fear of heaven that is based upon the Bible. Okay. Then it talks about the evil waters of our Mishnah. This denotes harmful views and false beliefs. People can read into your words wrong ideas that conform into the erroneous way of thinking. My bro, within the 4th century, by the 4th century, when the councils began, they created uh, false belief upon false belief, including just the beginning about the essence of God. They made God into some type of three-horned monster, the Trinity, and all these different things. These were things that a Jew never conceived of, and he
Right.
never believed anything like
Right.
that.
Right.
Okay, these
Right.
consoles were made without any advice or help from the Jewish community. They
Right.
did it on their own. They did
Right.
it on their own. Okay,
Right.
that's what the evil waters. The evil waters represents heresy, heretical views. Okay,
Yes.
and then it says the disciples who come after you, that come after you and will drink of these evil waters. The digestive commentary says that is the disciples who subsequently come to your place of exile. Okay, the exile of whatever, the Roman exile, Christianity, etc. Alternatively, those who hear the corrupt teachings that are ascribed to you, are ascribed to Jesus, and take them to be true, they will die as a result of their sin, either literally or spiritually, by denying the Torah, and thus the name of heaven will be desecrated. This is what people don't understand, that our teachings, and if you're not very careful what you learn and what you're teaching other people, you can desecrate the name of God. And so it says this actually happened to Antigonus of Soko, whose disciples Sadok and Baitos misunderstood his teachings and passed their erroneous beliefs on to their disciples, thus founding two heretical movements that we find actually in the New Testament. Who were the heretical movements? The Sadducees and the Bathusians. These two groups, you know how they happened? Because they misunderstood the teaching of their teacher, who was Rabbi Antigonus of Soko. Okay, they misunderstood one of his teachings, and two heretical sects were born from that.
Mm.
Okay,
Mm.
I'm gonna give us a little bit of insight, okay, into what's going on here. I'm using the ArtScroll Perkei Avot on this, which has a lot of great insights.
I love it.
It says like this. Avtalion says, scholars, be cautious with your words. The Mishnah speaks allegorically of the dangerous results of unclear teachings that lend themselves to misinterpretation. One should take utmost care not to express himself in a way that can be misunderstood by listeners who are unaccustomed to his mode of expression. If they're unaccustomed to his mode of expression, how much more will you be unaccustomed if you have no context to the religious background of these teachers? You're going to make it up as you go. You're going to make it up as whatever you know. Mm-hmm. And within the Hebrew context, within the rabbi's world, and within the non-Jewish world that came in after him, there's two different worlds. There's an Eastern Hebrew thought, and on the other side, there's a Hellenistic Greek philosophical thought. Okay? Mm. It says like this. It says, the Rambam, who's a rabbi, and Rabbi Yonah view this Mishnah as a reaction to the incident of Tzadok and Bothus, which we just talked about. In that instance, the teaching that one should serve, this is the teaching of the rabbi that they misunderstood. It says, the teaching that one should serve God without expectation of a reward was misinterpreted to mean that there is no reward or punishment for one's deeds. And as a result, a great section of Jewry cut themselves off from the Torah nation. Meaning, what happened? When he wrote that teaching that one should serve God without thinking about God rewarding you, without him, we should just serve him because he's God. Not because there's a reward, which there is a reward, but you shouldn't serve him in that way, okay? This is what he taught, but two of his disciples thought that what it meant was that there is no reward of punishment. There's no reward or punishment. Right. So there's no life in the world to come. Right. And this was taught. The Sadducees taught that there was no world. There was no world to come. All there was this world. Okay, That's what happened. And so it says like this. Scholars therefore must be careful not to make statements of theological or philosophical import, which are either unclear, bear due interpretation, or may lead to a distortion in basic beliefs and principles of faith. Yikes. All right. It says, the words of a rabbinic scholar are potent. Disciples live by them. Listeners follow them. And others are influenced by them. An ambiguous statement may lead many astray if it is open to heretical interpretation. Man, I don't know if many of our listeners agree with this or not, but it's history. It's part of history that this happened to the teachings of Jesus, not of his own fault, right, but on the fault of others who were not readily prepared to or educated to understand his words.
Yes.
And they were so arrogant that that we know that there was a schism there in the beginning. They didn't want to hear from the Jews. They thought the Jews were heretics, and they believed that all their teachings were heretics. And
Yes.
so this is what it was. They made it up as they went. How did they?
Yes.
How did they go? We know also know if you read a lot of church background and history that the church fathers were very much educated in Greek philosophy. Okay,
Yes.
um, so this is what we're hearing here. It says, an audience beyond the scholar's imagination may see him as the source of a doctrine he never espoused or even contemplated. Mitch, do you hear that?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I'll read that again. An audience beyond the scholar's imagination may see him as the source of a doctrine he never espoused or even contemplated. We hear it all the time that Jesus believed in a Trinity, that he was part of this Trinity. They're inputting words and thoughts into a person that never believed anything like
Yes.
this,
Yes.
or none of the apostles.
Yes.
Attackers of Torah tradition may claim him as one of their own.
Yes. No, that's true.
All because the scholar failed to exercise caution and did not articulate his ideas properly. The Rambam says this. Okay, now we have to kind of go to bat here. We have to get Jesus back and the apostles back. Okay, we got to go to bat for him, because it's almost seeming like Jesus was unclear with his teachings. He was not careful with his teachings. So were the apostles not careful with his teachings, and so it's their fault that their teachings were misinterpreted and misrepresented, and so what they got is what they got because they deserved it. God forbid. That's not what we're saying at all. Actually, I just read to you beforehand. We read that Jesus says like this again, Matthew 10:5. These 12 apostles Yeshua sent out, instructing them, go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Go to other Jews who know the context, who have an education in Torah Judaism in the Bible, right? This is what he said. What else did he say to the Samaritans? In the Gospel of John, he's talking to a Samaritan woman at a holy place called Jacob's Well, which was in the town of the Samaritans of that time. He was staying there. It's something that Jews do all the time. They go to holy places of the patriarchs, of other heroes of the past times, and it's a place of where they can pray to God. I mean, Jews do this to this very day. Okay. So he's there, and a Samaritan woman comes to draw out water. He asks her for a drink of water. At that
Yes.
time, there was a big schism. I mean, there was problems between Jews and Samaritans. You know, they didn't get along. The Samaritans believed other religious ideas. It was almost like two different faiths, though the Samaritans based their beliefs on the law of Moses. She tells him, how can you ask me for a drink of water? You Jews don't drink anything that comes from Samaritans' hands. They could be ritually impure, right?
Yeah.
And then he goes into his discourse about, if you knew who was asking you for a drink of water, you would ask him, and he would give you life-giving water. He's talking about Torah. He's talking about the words of God. This is
Absolutely.
what he's talking about, right? And then he tells her, you Samaritans do not know whom you worship, but we Jews know whom we worship, because salvation comes from the Jews.
Yes. Oh.
Okay, he didn't say salvation comes from me, or he says from the Jewish people. We have the point of contact of truth
And
with God.
who
We have the
who says that? Who says that, Ray?
Jesus of Nazareth,
Say who says that?
Jesus Christ.
And
Jesus
salvation comes from who?
from the Jewish people. Salvation comes from the Jewish people. That's exactly what he said with his own words. And you could clearly see that's why he tells his disciples, don't go nowhere among the Gentiles or enter no town of the Samaritans. They don't really know. You don't know. They don't know whom they worship. That's what he's saying here in Matthew 10:5. They don't have an education. They don't
Yes.
know it.
Yes.
Okay. Him being that point of contact, it says that in John that he stayed there with the Samaritans for two days, teaching them. and many of them believed that he was the prophet who was to come. All right, I'm gonna stop there in that art scroll commentary. Maybe I could take some pictures and put some more context in the comment section. But I want to read. We want to liberate Jesus from fault. As we said, Jesus never wrote anything down. Who wrote things down for him were his apostles, and they never really thought that his teachings were going to go to people who were uneducated in the foundations of the Bible. Okay, we know from history that a lot of the non-Jews who were coming into the faith, who were coming to believe in the God of Israel, in monotheism and all the different foundations of the Torah, they had to go through a period of a trial period of where they were learning all these foundations.
They had to be brought up to speed.
They had to be brought up to speed.
That's why the Didache was so important back then, that those
ancient
writings
document,
were to bring them up to speed and not to create a separate vehicle that they jumped onto and rode. They had to be brought up to speed and understanding culturally and historically what was being taught to them. So
exactly. Now I'm going to read the words of an ultra-Orthodox Jew. He's not a Christian. He's not a Messianic. He's none of these things. His name is Diavitz, which is short for his name, Rabbi Yaakov Emden, who was a great Talmudist. Again, I mean, an ultra-Orthodox Jew. And listen to what he said about Jesus of Nazareth words, his teachings. After reading them, I give him a lot of credit. After reading them and not listening to hearsay, he did his own research. He did his own background and started, learning Jesus' teachings from its own context and his religious context. And he was able to come out with a different idea and understanding of Jesus' words. This is what he says about him. He says this. Let's see if I find this real quick here. Okay, he says in one part of this book, he says this. Rabbi Emden says of Jesus, therefore you must realize and accept the truth from him who speaks it, that we see clearly here that the Nazarene and his apostles did not wish to destroy the Torah from Israel. God forbid. For it is written so in Matthew chapter 5:17, the Nazarene having said, do not suppose that I have come to abolish the Torah. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill, meaning to keep. I tell you this, so long as heaven and earth endure, not a letter, not a stroke will disappear from the Torah until it is achieved. If any man therefore sets aside even the least of the Torah's commands and teaches others to do the same, he will have the lowest place in the kingdom of heaven. Whereas anyone who keeps the Torah and teaches others so will stand high in the kingdom of heaven. This is also recorded in Luke chapter 16. It is therefore exceedingly clear that the Nazarene never dreamed of destroying the Torah. This is an ultra-Orthodox Jew talking about Jesus of Nazareth. I mean, this whole work that he did is truly amazing and inspiring. He continues on talking about the apostles, especially about Apostle Paul, how he was a law-abiding Jew who taught within its correct context, who taught Torah and was teaching non-Jews their obligations as non-Jews. Okay. So he goes in another place, and this same work, the Nazarene apostles meant to abolish. He says again in another place, he says, certainly, therefore, there is no doubt that one who seeks truth will agree with our thesis that the Nazarene and his apostles never meant to abolish the Torah of Moses from one who is born a Jew. Okay. Now watch this. He says it like this. Watch this. He says, it is therefore a habitual saying of mine, not as a hypocritical flatterer, God forbid, for I am of the faithful believers of Israel, and I know well that the remnant of Israel will not speak falsehood, nor will their mouths contain a deceitful tongue. That the Nazarene brought about a double kindness in the world. On the one hand, he strengthened the Torah of Moses majestically, as mentioned earlier, and not one of our sages spoke out more emphatically concerning the immutability of the Torah. On the other hand, he did much good for the Gentiles. Listen to this key thing that he says here. Okay, it's in brackets. He says, provided that they do not turn about his intent as they please, as some foolish ones have done, because they did not fully understand the intent of the authors of the Gospels.
Oh,
He says, I have recently seen someone publish a book and he had no idea about what he was writing. For if he had understood the subject, he would have kept his silence and not wasted the paper and ink. There are also found among us, Jewish people, he says, foolish scholars who know not their right from their left in the written and oral Torahs, and cause the people to err with their pompous pronouncements. But there are true scholars among the Christians, just as there are the chosen few among Torah scholars. And there are few of the truly great. And these are few of the truly great. He says, by doing away with idolatry and removing the images from their midst, he obligated them with the 7 commandments so that they should not be as the beasts of the field. He's attributing all this to Jesus and his teachings. And this is what happens when his teachings went into the non-Jewish world. But did you see what this man said? He says, as long as they do not twist the intent and the context and the true meaning of his words, that, I mean, Jesus he's brought about great blessings in the world.
yes. Yes.
And he had solemn warnings for the Christian world of his time. And the things that he said were like unheardable at his time.
Yes.
Unheard of, I'm sorry. I'm going to read a few other things that I have written here. Please bear with me. And I mean, there's no other way that we can drash this out here. There's
Yeah.
no other way.
Yeah.
There's a book by Rabbi Nachman of Breslov. It's called Sefer Hamidot. Okay, so like talking about different character traits and stuff like that. And in a section called Learning, I wrote down a few of these quotes. It says like this. In page 293 of this book, he says, when a wicked person says he's talking about Torah concepts, know that he causes, when a wicked person says Torah, he's talking about Torah, know that he causes to stumble those who listen to his teachings. When a person his deeds is not correct and he teaches Torah, know that he causes to stumble those who listen to his teachings. You hear that?
Yes.
Then there's another one. It says like this, all, and you have all of someone, all of a Torah scholar is conducive to learning. So when you appraise and you have in high regard a Torah scholar, it helps for learning. Think about the first Christians, how much they denigrated anybody who was a rabbi, and they denigrated Judaism. Page 295, he says this, one who says this Torah saying is pleasant and that one is not loses the wealth of the Torah. This is Christianity 101. They say the New Testament is good, the Old Testament is no good. In so many words, this is what they say.
Exactly.
I mean, they might say it with a lot more prettier words, but it's still saying the same thing.
Right.
And now to really break it down, okay, we're using mostly Rabbi Nachman's teachings to break this whole Mishnah down. I'm gonna read to you guys, as we explained earlier, and we could look this up and we could put it in the comment section. The church fathers were highly educated in Greek philosophy.
Yes.
They didn't have a Torah education background. They did not have this.
Yes.
So they began to interpret the words of the Bible and of Jesus' teachings of the Bible, which is the New Testament. They began to read them and understand them in this philosophical worldview, a Hellenistic type of background.
Yes.
Okay, some church fathers, even with one side of their mouth, seem to say that Greek philosophy is no good or Hellenism was no good, but with the other side of their mouth, they interpret the words through a Hellenistic viewpoint.
Yes.
Okay, they do this. Scholars have told us this. So Rabbi Nachman, he has a chapter in this book called Advice, where he talks about alien philosophies and ideologies. Listen to what he says. What can happen to a true righteous man's teachings if fallen in the wrong hands? Listen to this. The only true wisdom is the wisdom of the righteous men and women of God. Okay? The tzaddikim, he uses that word. It brings them to a lofty perception of God and gives them the power to communicate their perception to those who follow them. Compared with this wisdom, all other ideological systems are utter foolishness. but because of our many sins. It can happen at times that this genuine wisdom falls into the hands of the heathens and the forces of the other side, the dark side. It says, because of our many sins, which there was many sins in the first century. This is the reason why the temple was destroyed, etc., etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
This wisdom fell into the hands of heathens. This is code word for non-Jews
Yes.
and the powers of darkness. It says like this: he's talking about non-Jews, their newfound wisdom, this wisdom that they have taken as their own, their newfound wisdom gives them power and dominion. And then the heathens gain the upper hand, God forbid, as Christianity did, as we know from history. The Romans adopted Christianity as the state religion and continued to be strong. Said, who can bear the sound of the great and terrible cry when this wisdom falls into their hands and fools affect to be wise? They try to adapt this genuine wisdom to their own purposes as if it could be made part of their own ideologies, as if their own foolishness had anything to do with the knowledge of God. They start claiming that they alone are the wise ones, and there is no wisdom greater than their own erroneous speculations, parasitic as they are on the fallen, genuine wisdom. God himself cries out because of this. Every Jew has a part to play in the task of identifying how this wisdom has fallen into the hands can be separated from them and elevated in order to return it to its source. This is what we saw Rabbi Jacob Emden doing.
Mm-hmm.
The way to achieve this is through acts of charity and kindness under the guidance and inspiration of the righteous men and women. Last thing I will read, he says, wisdom is the root of all things. Psalms 104:24. One should always guard one's mind against false ideologies. The only way to achieve fulfillment in life is through the pursuit of genuine wisdom, namely the wisdom of the Torah, which is concerned with godliness. Compared with all this, all other systems of ideology are without needing philosophical justification. They have pure faith. The Hebrew word for beyond is ever, and the Jews are called Evrim, Hebrews, precisely because they are beyond all this speculation. With a faith which transcends philosophy, we do not need to speculate about the truth. We know it. We have received it from our fathers of blessed memory.
Yes. Amen.
All right. So, I mean, I think we kind of we really hit it on all places. I think we touched on all parts of history and how it actually, all this stuff came down to us. But this Mishnah really hit home for me. The Mishnah that says, Aftalion said, scholars, be careful with your words, lest you incur the penalty of exile and are banished to a place of evil waters. The evil waters being heresy. And all scholars must be careful with their words, where they go, who you're teaching them to. Do they have the what is the word? Do they have the education to be able to understand you?
Yeah.
Okay. A teacher needs to know these things.
Yes.
Because if not, the disciples, after you have taught that, the other disciples who come and hear the words of other people who have
Yes.
taught what they thought was true,
Yes.
they will come after and they will drink from them and they will also be poisoned. And thus the name of heaven will be desecrated perpetually because it's passed on. Boom, 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 boom. This is passed on, and this is what's going on. So I think we've liberated Jesus and his apostles. We've brought to the forefront what he actually did. What he said through his own words.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed to be that it was divine providence that this will happen this way.
Yes.
We all have a part to play. We all have made our own mistakes. We have to accept responsibility. It's not over. If someone is reading this, as you and I have done before, and you come across this type of information, it is your job to search it out. It's your job to try to check these things to see if they're so, and if they are, everyone has to make the right reparations and to move forward with truth.
Yes.
One should not
Yes.
be afraid of truth. One should be able to follow it, you know?
Yes. Well, Ray, I knew that you had mentioned to me before we started recording this um, how impactful this particular Mishnah was for you, and the amount of knowledge and the amount of resource and the amount of effort you put into it to bring some of these truths to the table. Now I'm going to say this, and then we'll close it. We'll close it out with this here. I'm not really sure, Ray, that um, I'm not really sure that the church is in a position to be able to unfold this, or not so much a position, but a willingness um, to unlearn, relearn, and then try to develop what scripture or what we read, what true discipleship is. Um, when we use the word righteous teachers, Zodics, um, that's not what we understand in the Christian world as preachers or pastors. I mean, pastors are pastors, preachers are preachers. Um, I, I don't want to put a bad label on anything. I'm just saying that it's it's to connect to a true teacher, to connect to even with Jesus, to connect with Jesus, you have to connect with Jesus properly. If you don't connect with Jesus properly, then you're out there spinning like a lot of Christians are today. And this is why we have always pushed context, context, context. Culture, culture is crucial because we brought that up several times here as well. And just the importance of what you're teaching has to be, again, we live in a world, Ray, you know it, where culture is truth. Um, the media does what the media does. It's left up to us to investigate, to do our homework, to go out and seek the truth. And a lot of times that truth comes harshly after we've thought we've had the answer for many, many years. And then all of a sudden that truth comes up. And humbly, we have to take a step back and go, crap, I was wrong, you know?
Right.
And then begin the process of unfolding that truth. So you did a great job today, bro. And this was a tough one. This was a big one, and it's one that you can't listen to one time. You're gonna have People are gonna have to listen to it a couple of times to pull out segments that they can take and work with. But I appreciate you, man. I appreciate just the wisdom that
Appreciate you.
you bring to the
Appreciate you, man.
table. I'm still I'm trying to get there and learning, righteous deeds and what they look like daily in my life and with what I do, but also my desire and my love for the Torah now and for the people who wrote the Holy Scriptures. How important it is to implement that into my studies daily. So thank you, bro, and
Thank you, my man.
thanks for getting up with us here. For those of you out there that are going to listen to this or are listening to it or have listened to it, um, as always, Ray and I, we say do your own homework. Go out, and never before has there been a time and an opportunity to seek truth in so many different ways. Do your homework. Challenge what you hear. Don't just be led by a leash because it's always been that way. Um, Seek out that truth. But we wish you blessings to your families, to you, brother. I wish you a blessing. Blessings to you and the boys, and hope you continue to heal as you're supposed to, do what you're supposed to. and get out and enjoy this day a little bit, man. All right.
Yeah, many blessings to you and the family, Mitch, and I always appreciate this time with you, man. Blessings to all our listeners, and yeah, appreciate you.
All right, bro. Well, everybody take care, and we'll see you soon again.